Getting rich is easy. I mean that literally. The mechanics are not complicated. Buy assets, let them compound. Repeat. A 10-year-old can understand the math. Warren Buffett explained his entire strategy in a single sentence. Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. That's it. That's the whole playbook. You could tattoo it on your wrist and never need another finance book again. So why isn't everyone rich? That's the wrong question. And the fact that you're asking it proves the system worked exactly as designed. The real question, the one nobody in a classroom ever asked you to sit with, is this. Why is it so devastatingly, structurally, almost cosmically difficult to stop being poor? Not to get rich, to stop being poor. Those are not the same problem. They are not even in the same universe of difficulty. Getting rich, once you have capital, momentum, and cognitive bandwidth, is a matter of patience and basic arithmetic. Not being poor, escaping the gravitational field of financial scarcity, requires something closer to a rocket launch. And most people are trying to do it by running faster on foot. That distinction is everything, and school never taught it to you. School, in fact, spent 12 to 16 years actively teaching you the opposite. Let's talk about what school actually is, not what it claims to be. Not the brochure version with smiling children and inspirational quotes about potential. What it functionally, mechanically, behaviorally produces in the humans who pass through it. School is an obedience factory with a diploma at the end. That's not cynicism. That's engineering. The modern school system was not designed by philosophers dreaming of enlightened citizens. It was designed explicitly, historically, with documented intent to produce compliant industrial workers. Horace Mann, the American education reformer who shaped the US system in the 1840s, was directly inspired by the Prussian model. The Prussian model was built to create soldiers and factory workers. People who show up on time, follow instructions without questioning them, perform repetitive tasks without complaint, and defer to authority as a reflex rather than a choice. The bells, the rows of desks, the permission required to use the bathroom, the punishment for speaking out of turn, the reward for memorizing what you're told. None of this is accidental. Every structural element of the traditional classroom is a behavioral conditioning mechanism, and it conditions one thing above all else: the acceptance of external authority over your time, your attention, and your output. You were trained for over a decade to wait for someone else to tell you what to do, to measure your worth by someone else's rubric, to define success as performing well on tasks you did not choose, in service of goals you did not set, for rewards you did not negotiate. And then, at the end of this process, you are handed a certificate and told, "Now, go be free."
But you weren't free. You were formatted. You were a hard drive that had been wiped and rewritten with an operating system designed for employment, not ownership. Designed for compliance, not creation. Designed for the salary, not the equity. And here is where the physics begins. Think about gravity, not as a metaphor yet, as a literal force. Gravity is not something you fight once and win. It is constant. It is omnidirectional. It does not care about your effort, your intentions, or your feelings about it. It simply pulls. And the critical insight from orbital mechanics, the thing that changes everything, is that there are two fundamentally different categories of velocity. There is the speed at which you can sustain flight, circling the planet in a stable orbit. And there is escape velocity, the speed at which you break free of the gravitational field entirely and enter a different regime of physics, where the rules change. First, cosmic velocity.
Approximately 7.9 kilometers per second. Enough to orbit. You're moving. You're not falling, but you're still captured. You're still in the system. Second cosmic velocity. Approximately 11.2 kilometers per second. Escape. You leave the field. The rules change. Gravity still exists, but it no longer defines your trajectory. Financial poverty, and the psychological, cognitive, and social ecosystem that surrounds it operates exactly like a gravitational field. It has mass. It has pull. And the pull is not linear. It doesn't just slow you down a little. Below a certain threshold of resources, the system actively accelerates your descent. The less you have, the more expensive everything becomes. The more expensive everything becomes, the less you can save. The less you can save, the less you can invest. The less you invest, the more dependent you are on labor income. The more dependent you are on labor income, the more vulnerable you are to any disruption. And disruptions, in a life lived close to the financial edge, are not rare events. They are the weather. This is not a motivational metaphor. This is the actual structure of the system. And school did not teach you this. School taught you that if you work hard and follow the rules, you will be rewarded. That is not a description of reality. That is a description of employment. Those are not the same thing. The theory of boots, articulated by Terry Pratchett through the character of Sam Vimes, but grounded in a real economic phenomenon, captures something essential here. A man who can afford to spend $50 on boots buys a pair that lasts 10 years. A man who can only afford $10 buys a pair that lasts 1 year. Over 10 years, the poor man spends $100 on boots. The rich man spends $50. The poor man's feet are wet half the time. The rich man's feet are dry. The poor man is not making worse decisions. He is making the only decisions available to him. But the outcome is that poverty is structurally more expensive than wealth. Now scale that principle across every dimension of a human life and you begin to see the architecture of the trap. Credit. If you have money, you can borrow at 3 to 5%. If you don't have money, you borrow at 20 to 400%. The payday loan industry, a multi-billion-dollar sector, exists entirely to extract wealth from people who have none. The interest rates are not predatory by accident, they are predatory by design. And they are legal, and they are defended by the same political and economic system that your school taught you to respect and participate in. A person borrowing $500 at a payday loan rate of 400% APR to cover a car repair so they can get to work is not making a bad financial decision. They are making the only decision available to them. But the cost of that decision compounds, and the compounding works against them, not for them. Food. Cheap food, the food available in food deserts, in corner stores, in fast food chains that cluster in low-income neighborhoods, is calorically dense and nutritionally empty. It is engineered to be addictive, to spike dopamine, to create cravings that override satiety signals. It is also, per unit of actual nutrition, more expensive than whole foods. A bag of chips costs $1 and delivers 200 calories of processed carbohydrates and industrial seed oils. A pound of lentils costs $1 and delivers 1,600 calories of protein, fiber, and micronutrients. But the lentils require time to prepare, equipment to cook, and knowledge to use. Time, equipment, and knowledge are all scarce resources when you are working 2 jobs and sleeping 6 hours a night. So you buy the chips. And the chips make you tired. And being tired makes you less productive. and being less productive keeps you poor. The loop closes. Housing. Renting is, over a lifetime, dramatically more expensive than owning. But owning requires a down payment. A down payment requires savings. Savings requires surplus income. Surplus income requires either high wages or low expenses. Low expenses are difficult to achieve when you are renting because rent consumes a disproportionate share of income at the lower end of the wage scale. In many American cities, a minimum wage worker would need to work over 100 hours per week to afford a one-bedroom apartment at fair market rent. This is not a housing crisis. This is a mathematical impossibility dressed up as a policy failure. Transportation. In cities designed around car ownership, which is most American cities, not having a car is not just inconvenient, it is economically crippling. Public transit routes are designed around the needs of commuters going to downtown office jobs, not around the needs of service workers going to dispersed locations at irregular hours. Without a car, you cannot access the jobs that pay enough to buy a car. Without the job, you cannot buy the car. The trap is spatial as well as financial. And school taught you none of this. School taught you that the system is a meritocracy, that if you study hard and get good grades, you will get a good job. And if you get a good job, you will be fine. The word quote_2 is doing enormous work in that sentence. Fine means employed. Fine means receiving a salary. Fine means participating in the consumer economy as a consumer, not as an owner. Fine means orbiting, not escaping. The A students, by and large, become the employees of the C students. Not because the C students were smarter, not because they worked harder, but because the C students, often through necessity, sometimes through temperament, occasionally through genuine insight, never fully internalized the obedience programming. They kept asking the wrong questions. They kept coloring outside the lines. They kept getting in trouble for not following instructions. And in doing so, they accidentally preserved something the A students traded away for gold stars: the capacity to define their own metrics of success. This is not a celebration of mediocrity. This is an observation about what the educational reward system actually selects for. It selects for compliance. It selects for the ability to perform well on standardized tasks, defined by external authorities. It selects for the psychological comfort of operating within clear rules and receiving clear feedback. These are genuinely useful traits in an employee. They are actively counterproductive in an entrepreneur, an investor, or anyone attempting to build wealth rather than earn it. The distinction between building wealth and earning it is not semantic. It is the entire game. Earning wealth means exchanging your time for money. You have 24 hours in a day. You sleep 7 or 8. You have 16 or 17 hours of potential labor. The market will pay you a certain rate per hour. Your maximum possible income is therefore bounded by a hard ceiling. Hours available multiplied by hourly rate. You can increase the rate by acquiring skills. You can increase the hours by sleeping less and working more. But the ceiling is real. It is physical. Time is finite. You cannot manufacture more of it. And when you stop working, when you get sick, when you get old, when you get fired, when the economy shifts, the income stops. Immediately, completely. The tap turns off. Building wealth means acquiring assets that generate income independent of your labor. A rental property generates rent, whether you are awake or asleep. healthy or sick, employed or not. A stock portfolio generates dividends and capital appreciation whether you are paying attention or not. A business with systems and employees generates revenue whether the founder is present or absent. These are not passive in the sense of requiring no effort to create. They require enormous effort to create. But once created, they operate on a different mathematical basis. They compound. They scale. They do not stop when you stop. School teaches you to earn. It does not teach you to build. It teaches you to be an excellent input into someone else's wealth-building machine. It teaches you to optimize your hourly rate. It teaches you to negotiate your salary. It does not teach you to own the machine. It does not teach you to be the person collecting the rent, the dividends, the equity appreciation. It does not teach you that the goal is not a better salary. The goal is to stop needing one. And here is where the biology enters the picture. Because this is not just an economic problem, it is a neurological one. Chronic financial stress, the kind that comes from living paycheck to paycheck, from not knowing if you can cover rent, from the constant low-grade terror of one unexpected expense destroying everything, does measurable, documented damage to the human brain. This is not metaphor. This is neuroscience.
Cortisol is the primary stress hormone. In acute situations, a predator, a physical threat, a genuine emergency, cortisol is adaptive. It sharpens focus, mobilizes energy, suppresses non-essential functions, and prepares the body for fight or flight. It is a brilliant short-term survival mechanism, but it was designed for short-term use. Chronic cortisol elevation, the kind produced by sustained financial insecurity, is neurologically catastrophic. It damages the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for memory formation and spatial navigation. It suppresses the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for long-term planning, impulse control, and abstract reasoning. It hyperactivates the amygdala, the region responsible for threat detection and fear responses. The practical result: chronic financial stress makes you worse at exactly the cognitive tasks required to escape financial stress. It impairs your ability to plan ahead. It impairs your ability to resist short-term temptations in favor of long-term gains. It impairs your ability to learn new skills, to think creatively, to evaluate complex trade-offs. A 2013 study published in Science, conducted by Senthil Mulainathan and Eldal Shafir, found that the cognitive burden of poverty reduces effective IQ by approximately 13 points. 13 points. That is the difference between average and below average cognitive function. That is the difference between being able to navigate complex financial decisions and being unable to. And it is not a character flaw. It is a neurological consequence of the environment. The system, in other words, is not just economically self-reinforcing, it is neurologically self-reinforcing. Poverty impairs the cognitive function required to escape poverty. The trap has a biological lock. And then there is the dopamine system. The brain's reward circuitry evolved to motivate behavior by associating certain actions with pleasure. In a natural environment, this system drives you toward food, sex, social connection, and achievement, all things that are genuinely good for survival and reproduction. In a modern consumer economy, this system is a vulnerability. It is a target, and it is being exploited with extraordinary precision. Every notification on your phone is a dopamine trigger. Every scroll through social media is a variable reward schedule, the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. Every purchase, every unboxing,
Every upgrade delivers a brief spike of dopamine, followed by a return to baseline,
followed by a craving for the next spike. The consumer economy is not selling you products, it is selling you dopamine hits. And the business model depends on you never being satisfied. Satisfaction is the enemy of consumption. The goal is perpetual craving. For people under financial stress, people whose prefrontal cortex is already suppressed by cortisol, whose capacity for long-term planning is already compromised, this is particularly devastating. The immediate relief of a purchase, the brief dopamine spike of a new thing, the temporary escape of entertainment, these are not irrational responses to a difficult situation. They are neurologically predictable responses to a system that has been engineered to exploit exactly this vulnerability. They are self-medication. And like most self-medication, they treat the symptom while worsening the underlying condition. You buy the thing you cannot afford because the dopamine hit is real and immediate, and the financial consequence is abstract and future. Your brain, operating in survival mode, is not well equipped to weight abstract future consequences against immediate, present relief. This is not weakness. This is biology. But the outcome is the same. The money that could have been the beginning of an asset is instead the continuation of a liability. The gap between where you are and where you need to be grows slightly wider. The gravitational pull increases slightly. The escape velocity required increases slightly. And school did not teach you any of this. School did not teach you how your own brain works. It did not teach you about cortisol and the prefrontal cortex and the dopamine system and the ways in which your neurological architecture can be exploited by systems designed to exploit it. It taught you the quadratic formula. It taught you the dates of historical battles. It taught you to raise your hand before speaking. It did not teach you the most important subject of all: how to think about thinking, and how to protect your cognitive resources from the forces that want to consume them. So what do you do? If the trap is this deep, economic, neurological, social, structural, what is the actual path out? The first thing to understand is that you cannot fight gravity with effort alone. You cannot work your way out of a system designed to keep you in it by simply working harder within the system. That is first cosmic velocity thinking. You orbit faster. You are still captured. The escape requires a qualitative shift, not a quantitative one. It requires a different kind of energy applied in a different direction. The first phase of that shift is what I call monk mode, not as a lifestyle aesthetic, not as a productivity hack, as a genuine, temporary, radical restructuring of your resource allocation. The premise is simple. Your cognitive bandwidth is finite, and right now, most of it is being consumed by noise, by the dopamine economy, by social obligations that drain rather than build, by entertainment that anesthetizes rather than educates, by the constant low-grade stimulation of a world designed to keep your attention fragmented and your impulse control depleted. Monk mode means cutting the noise, aggressively. Not forever, temporarily. Long enough to reclaim your prefrontal cortex. Long enough to let the cortisol levels drop. Long enough to remember what it feels like to think clearly, to plan, to imagine a future that is different from the present. This means
reducing or eliminating social media. It means reducing or eliminating alcohol and other substances that suppress executive function. It means reducing or eliminating entertainment consumption that is purely passive. It means sleeping enough. It means eating in ways that support cognitive function rather than undermine it. It means creating, even briefly, even imperfectly, the neurological conditions under which genuine strategic thinking becomes possible. This is not asceticism for its own sake. It is engineering. You are not punishing yourself. You are clearing the runway. You cannot launch a rocket from a swamp. You need solid ground. Monk mode is the process of finding solid ground inside your own skull. The second phase is what investors call building a moat. In business, a moat is a competitive advantage that is difficult to replicate, something that protects your position from competition. In personal economics, the equivalent is a unique skill stack, a combination of 2 or 3 capabilities that, individually, are not rare, but in combination are genuinely unusual. Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, articulated this principle clearly. He was not the world's best artist. He was not the world's funniest person. He was not the world's deepest business thinker. But he was in the top 25% in all 3. And the combination of those 3 capabilities in one person was rare enough to be extraordinarily valuable. The intersection of skills is where the moat lives. School teaches you to specialize, to go deep in one subject, to become an expert in a single domain. This is useful for employment. Employers want specialists who can perform specific functions. It is less useful for wealth creation, which tends to reward people who can see across domains, who can apply insights from one field to problems in another, who can communicate technical ideas to non-technical audiences, or who can combine creative and analytical thinking in ways that pure specialists cannot. The skill stack you need is not the one your school designed. It is the one that sits at the intersection of what you are genuinely curious about, what the market values, and what most people find difficult to combine. Programming and psychology, finance and storytelling, biology and design, engineering and sales. The combinations are endless. The principle is the same. Go to the intersection, not the center. The third phase is the hardest, because it requires confronting something deeply human. It requires confronting your social environment. There is a phenomenon in crab fishing known as the bucket effect. If you put a single crab in a bucket, it will climb out. If you put multiple crabs in a bucket, none of them will escape. Because every time one crab gets close to the top, the others pull it back down. Not out of malice, not out of conscious intent. Simply because they are all trying to climb, and the climbing of one threatens the position of the others. Human social environments operate on the same principle. Not always, not universally, but often enough that it must be named and addressed directly. The people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, your community, have a vested interest, often unconscious, in your remaining who you are. Your change threatens their stability. Your success highlights their stagnation. Your escape from the shared narrative, "This is just how things are for people like us," is an implicit challenge to the narrative they have built their identity around. This does not make them bad people, it makes them human. But it means that the social environment of poverty, or of mediocrity, or of any limiting belief system, is actively hostile to the kind of change required to escape it. Not through overt sabotage usually,
through subtle discouragement, through "who do you think you are?" through "that's not realistic," through the slow erosion of ambition that comes from spending all your time with people who have stopped believing that things can be different. The solution is not to hate your community. It is not to abandon everyone who knew you before. It is to be strategic about where you source your intellectual and aspirational environment.
And here is the extraordinary gift of the current moment in history. You do not need to physically relocate to access a better intellectual environment. You can do it through books, through lectures, through podcasts, through the recorded thoughts of the most successful, most insightful, most strategically sophisticated people who have ever lived. A book is a direct transmission of the author's best thinking, refined over years, available to you for the price of a coffee. Warren Buffett's letters to Berkshire Hathaway shareholders are free online. Charlie Munger's speeches on mental models are free online. The lectures of Richard Feynman on physics and thinking are free online. The writings of Marcus Aurelius on Stoicism and self-discipline are free online. You have access right now to a library that would have made the kings of previous centuries weep with envy. And most people use the same device that could access all of that to watch videos of strangers reacting to other videos. This is not a judgment, it is a choice. And choices have consequences. The person who spends 2 hours a day consuming content designed to trigger dopamine, and the person who spends 2 hours a day in conversation with the greatest minds in history are not having the same experience. They are not building the same brain. They are not moving toward the same future. The gap between them compounds, just like interest. Slowly at first, then suddenly. Which brings us to the mathematics. The actual, literal mathematics of why the current system is designed to keep most people exactly where they are. Compound interest is the most powerful force in the financial universe. Einstein may or may not have called it the eighth wonder of the world. The attribution is disputed, but the mathematics is not. Money that grows at a consistent rate does not grow linearly. It grows exponentially. $1,000 invested at 10% annual return becomes $1,100 after 1 year. After 10 years, it is $2,594. After 30 years, it is $17,449. After 50 years, it is $117,391. The money is doing work. The work compounds. The compounding accelerates. But here is the thing about compound interest that school never taught you. It works in both directions. Debt compounds too. A credit card balance at 24% APR, if you make only minimum payments, will take over 20 years to pay off and will cost you 3 to 4 times the original balance in interest. The bank is not lending you money. The bank is buying a stream of future income from you at a price that is extraordinarily favorable to the bank. You are selling your future labor at a discount. You are, in the most literal financial sense, working for the bank. The entire consumer credit system is a mechanism for transferring wealth from people who have less of it to people who have more of it. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is the explicit business model of the financial services industry, stated openly in their annual reports and investor presentations. The product is debt. The customer is the debtor. The profit is the interest. And the system is designed through marketing, through the normalization of debt, through the deliberate complexity of financial products, to maximize the amount of debt that people carry and the length of time they carry it. School did not teach you this.
School taught you to get a good job so you could afford a mortgage and a car payment and a credit card and a student loan. School taught you to be an excellent customer of the financial services industry. It did not teach you to be an owner of it. The difference between a liability and an asset is one of the most important concepts in personal finance, and it is almost never taught in schools. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out of your pocket. A rental property that generates more in rent than it costs in mortgage, taxes, and maintenance is an asset. A house you live in, despite what your parents told you, is primarily a liability. It costs you money every month. It may appreciate in value, but you cannot access that appreciation without selling it or borrowing against it. And borrowing against it creates more liability. A car is a liability. It depreciates. It costs money to maintain, insure, and fuel. A stock portfolio is an asset. A business that generates profit is an asset. A skill that you can sell repeatedly, a course, a book, a piece of software, is an asset. The wealthy accumulate assets. The poor accumulate liabilities, while believing they are accumulating assets. This is not because the poor are stupid. It is because the entire marketing apparatus of the consumer economy is devoted to convincing people that consumption is investment, that a new car is a statement of success rather than a transfer of wealth, that a bigger house is a sign of achievement rather than a larger liability, that the latest phone is a tool rather than a dopamine delivery device with a monthly payment attached. And school, which could have taught you to see through this, instead prepared you to participate in it. School prepared you to earn a salary large enough to service the debts required to maintain the lifestyle that signals the success that justifies the salary. It is a closed loop. It is an orbit. It is first cosmic velocity. You are moving. You are not falling, but you are not free. The people who escape this loop, and they exist, in every demographic, in every country, in every economic environment, share certain characteristics. They are not uniformly smarter. They are not uniformly harder working. They are not uniformly luckier, though luck plays a role. What they share is a willingness to see the system clearly, to name it accurately, and to make decisions based on the actual rules of the game rather than the rules they were taught in school. They understand that the goal is not a higher salary. The goal is to stop needing one. They understand that the path to that goal runs through assets, not income. They understand that the most important investment they can make is in their own cognitive function, in their ability to think clearly, to learn continuously, to see opportunities that others miss because others are too busy consuming to notice. They understand that their social environment is either an accelerant or a drag, and they make deliberate choices about who they spend time with and whose thinking they allow to influence their own. They understand, most fundamentally, that the cage is real. The gravitational field is real. The forces arrayed against their escape are real and powerful, and have been operating for a long time. But the cage door is open. It has always been open. The lock is not on the door. The lock is in the mind. It was installed there, carefully and systematically, over 12 to 16 years of education designed to produce employees, not owners. Consumers, not creators. Debtors, not creditors. The question is not whether you can escape, The question is whether you are willing to pay the price of escape. And the price is real. It is not money. You may not have money. The price is discomfort. The price is the willingness to be different from the people around you, to be misunderstood by them, to be told you are being unrealistic, to sit with the uncertainty of a path that has no guaranteed outcome and no external authority validating your choices. The price is the willingness to think for yourself in a world that has spent your entire life training you not to. That is the second cosmic velocity. Not working harder, not earning more, not finding a better job or a better boss or a better industry. Thinking differently. Seeing the system for what it is. Making decisions based on the actual physics of wealth rather than the mythology of meritocracy. Building assets instead of accumulating liabilities. Protecting your cognitive function from the forces that want to consume it. Choosing your intellectual environment deliberately. Letting the mathematics of compounding work for you instead of against you. The school system will not teach you this. It was not designed to. It was designed to produce people who are useful to the existing economic order. People who show up, follow instructions, accept the salary offered, and spend that salary in ways that generate profit for the people who own the assets. It is a brilliant system if your goal is to be owned. It is a catastrophic system if your goal is to be free. You were handed an operating system at age 5 and told it was reality. You ran that operating system for the next decade and a half, and it shaped everything. How you think about money, how you think about authority, how you think about your own potential, how you think about what is possible for someone like you. The operating system is not reality. It is a program. Programs can be rewritten. The runway is clear. The fuel exists. The physics are on your side, if you understand them. The only question left is whether you are willing to light the engine. Most people won't, not because they can't, because the social gravity is real, and the discomfort of acceleration is real, and the uncertainty of the trajectory is real, and the voices saying, "Who do you think you are?" are loud and familiar, and come from people you love. Most people will choose the orbit, the stable, predictable, socially validated orbit of the salary and the mortgage and the retirement account that may or may not be enough, and the quiet, persistent sense that something was possible that never quite happened. But some people will light the engine. Some people will read this and feel not discouragement, but recognition. The specific, electric recognition of a truth that was always there, just below the surface, waiting to be named. Some people will look at the cage and see, for the first time clearly, that the door is open. And they will walk through it, not because it is easy, because it is the only thing that makes sense once you see it. Because once you understand the physics, once you see the system for what it is, once you feel the weight of the programming and recognize it as programming rather than reality, you cannot unsee it. The question stops being, "Can I escape?" and becomes, "How fast can I move?" The answer is, faster than you think. The compounding works in your favor too, once you're on the right side of it. The cognitive clarity that comes from reclaiming your attention compounds. The skills you build compound. The assets you acquire compound. The network of people thinking at a higher level compounds. The distance between you and the gravitational field increases with every decision made from clarity rather than fear, from strategy rather than reaction, from ownership rather than compliance. You were programmed for the salary. The programming was thorough, and it started early, and it was reinforced by every institution you passed through. But you are not the program. You are the programmer.
And the source code is yours to rewrite. The cage is open, the physics are real, the mathematics are on your side. Now move.